So, very good morning, everybody. My name is Ivan Filus, and I would like to welcome you to our webinar number 38, which will be focused on customer journey mapping. And I would like to welcome Slava Tuleja with us, who will be guiding you throughout this topic. And let me start with the presentation of the context and our project, which is supporting this series of webinars. There is a European initiative called Next Generation Internet, which is trying to make internet more human and the better place for all the citizens. And currently, is investing a couple of €100 million into this initiative, and it is supported via several projects. So, currently, we have more than 10 research and innovation actions that are supporting different areas of new technologies for internet, and we have also some coordination support action and also some multilingual projects. So far, we have about 20 different projects, which some of them are preparing so-called cascade funding. So they are not only funding themselves to work on the different areas of next generation, but also supporting small innovators. So far, more than 600 such innovators, which means startups and research teams, have been supported, and it is from the whole Europe, and not only Europe, but also the other countries. So far, we have about 36 countries. So, and also you can find all the information in the ngi.eu, where you can also find the current calls for proposal, which are still open. And also you can find an NGI map with all the relevant stakeholders in the area of NGI. On the next slide, you will see what we are focusing on. We are NGI Tetra. We are one of the supporting actions, and we would like to support the beneficiaries, those companies and the research teams that receive the small funding from NGI initiative. So not only in research, but we are focusing on the business area. So we are providing coaching, we are providing mentoring, we are providing training. And in the training, we are organizing boot camps and also webinars. Our plan is to organize about 40 webinars. So our project is still running, and you can find all the information at our website, business.ngi.eu, where you can also find the recordings of previous webinars, and also you will find the recording and the presentations from this webinar, so you can read it after we are finished. For specific beneficiaries, we are also providing one-to-one mentoring. And if you are part of NGI community, NGI beneficiaries, we can still provide you a specific mentors in different areas of your business development, IPR, and other topics that might be interesting for you. So what we are planning still, on the next slide, you will see that there are still some webinars in the pipeline. So there are 2 webinars in March. One on the 9th of March is like follow-up of one webinar we have already organized on GDPR. So if your work involves GDPR, so this is the advanced course for GDPR issues. And webinar number 40 should be focusing on open source business development. And also, as I mentioned, check our archive. There is a lot of webinars with even the presentations or recordings there. So business.ngi.eu. And on the next slide, you will see one of our new initiative we are launching. Slava, if we can go one slide further. We are organizing, no, there should be one more slide. Yeah, so this is, we are organizing public funding masterclass. First, our idea was to focus it only on the NGI beneficiaries, but good news is that we are open to all. So if you or your clients or friends are interested in getting more knowledge about the public funding, so this is a series of 5 webinars starting already tomorrow on understanding public funding. Then we have another 4 webinars on the accelerator, EIC accelerator, then strategies on tenders, then about cascade funding, and then the other possibilities on Horizon Europe. So don't hesitate to check our website, business.ngi.eu, and you can subscribe for any of these masterclass webinars. We are still open. And if you are one of those NGI beneficiaries, you can, on the top of the webinars, you may receive 2 to 3 hours of free mentoring from our expert. So there's still a lot of events what we are organizing, so please don't hesitate to visit our website and check. They're all free, and we have brilliant experts behind this. Okay, so this was for introduction, and I would like to give floor to Slavotula. I'm very happy that you are with us, where you are connecting from.
Thank you, Ivan. Thank you for the introduction. I'm connecting from Slovakia this morning. It's good to see so many of you joining the webinar, considering the current state of affairs in Europe and around us. In the upcoming 50 minutes or so, maybe 55, we will go through customer journey mapping. So we will discuss what customer journey maps are, what are some of the approaches which you can take when constructing one, and we will be also discussing why is it important to have one early on. Some of you know me already. My name is Slavotule. I'm the co-founder of Cube, which is an innovation studio. This is the place where we work quite a lot with customer journey maps. We create these for various corporates. We also create customer journey maps for some of the more early stage projects. And I was thinking, how to approach this session today. And customer journey mapping is something which we haven't discussed that much in the previous boot camps. So that's why I decided to focus more on customer journeys and also to explain why they are important and why is it important that we actually have the whole process mapped out, so we actually know what happens from the beginning all the way to conversion and also to customer support and so on. So that's something I would like to spend this upcoming time on. Apart from Cube, I'm also the CEO of Zaka, which is one of the biggest funds in Slovakia. We're supporting early stage companies, so startups in the seed and pre-seed phases. We're investing all over Central Europe. Quite a lot of investment we're doing in the Baltics. Some of the new investments we're also doing in the Balkans. So this is our focus. We invest roughly between 200 to 300,000 euros. We also like to co-invest and so on. And that also gives us quite a lot of exposure to various companies, and we see how they're working with their customer journeys and what stage they're at. Yearly, we analyze roughly 200 to 250 companies, so we have quite a wide view on how things are and what the companies are doing. Happy to see that there are so many of us. I think we will not have time to get to know each other, but what I always say, feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn. You will probably have some questions after this session, or if you're thinking of implementing your customer journey map, if there is something that I can support you with, feel free to reach out. I had quite a lot of people reaching out to me after boot camps that we did together, so I will then show my LinkedIn profile at the end, so feel free to reach out to me, get in touch, and just whenever you're writing to me, just let me know that I attended this and that webinar and I have these and these questions, and I'll try to support you. So what is important for today's session? I wrote 4 things, 4 key takeaways that we want to get out of this session. And the first one is to always look at your solution from the customer point of view. Customer point of view is very important when we will be discussing the front stage and the back stage of a customer journey map. So keep this in mind. It's also important to identify relevant problems. And why I mean that it's important to identify relevant problems, because companies which haven't mapped their customer journey usually have no idea what are the bottlenecks, what are the difficult parts, and what are the parts of the customer journey where the customer goes, I wasn't really sure about that. So it's important to keep that in mind. Third thing, we always want to somehow test the product or the improvement or the change a little bit before we start writing the first lines of code. So we don't want to invest into things that we want to improve. We first want to test them. Also, it's important to collect data from the customer journey in order to put that into our go-to-market strategy and to get our ideal customers. Because many companies that I see very often struggle with their go-to-market strategy, and they're building their go-to-market strategy upon big assumptions. And this is something that you want to avoid. And preparing your customer journey map might give you also valuable data for your go-to-market strategy. So let's take these 4 points, let's keep them in mind, and then I'll remind you of all these 4 as we go through the presentation. Some of the rules, just keep your microphone muted. If you have questions, write them into the chat. We will have a little bit of a discussion at the end if we have enough time. No need to have your cameras on because I don't see you anyway. So, and as I said, reach out to me on LinkedIn if you feel like you have some more questions, you need some help implementing it. Let's start with the first point. Let's discuss the context a little bit, okay? So customer journey mapping is one of the elements which you have in the whole concept of service design. What is service design, and what do I see that service design is? Service design is kind of a umbrella term for covering your customer experience part, so physical interactions which you have with your customer, and this can be during the sales process, but this could be also during the serving process, or it could also be during the support process at the end. So customer experience. Then we have UX, so user experience. So these are all the interactions which we have with the customer or the future customer online. So in a digital form, somewhere where you have to tap on a display or you visit the website or you interact with an application. Then together with that, we also have the aspect of operations, so all the backstage, so what is happening in the background so we can fulfill our customer experience and user experience expectations. And there is one underlying approach which is helping you with all these concepts, okay, and that's design thinking. So if I would have to say what service design is, it's an umbrella term for all those elements which make up a good service. Whenever we're thinking about good services, you know, there are multiple interesting companies that that you can reach out to. We were actually doing a research recently, and we were asking our clients, you know, what kind of good interactions have you had with certain companies? And you know, there are some which we found. Some of them were local ones. Some of them were international. Actually, the logo in the middle, you will not know it, but it's the tax office. Someone said that they had good experience with the tax office in Slovakia. Hard to believe, but this is what came out of the research. But then also, you know, if we look at more at the digital experiences, you know, we've all seen our Spotify Wrapped, which was a nice touch in a service which most of us are paying. And this is something which we got extra and got us excited about the service and somehow showed us the value of why we're paying for such a service. And this is something that was shown to us in the later stages, because most of us, if we're paying a Spotify subscription, you know, we're not in the acquisition phase. We're more in the kind of phase where Spotify is interested in our retention. And you know, with these small touches, such as the 2021 Wrapped initiative, you know, this is something that can excite us. The second thing, what I wanted to say is that there has been quite a lot of shift from product design to service design, and this is mainly due to the fact that 70% of GDP in the EU is made from service sector. Okay, so if we look 100 years back, where industrialization was happening and we were looking a lot at designing physical things, that's where product design came about. At some point we somehow had to switch that logic and also start looking at services and to craft services in the similar way as we did with physical products. And this is easily explained by the progression of economic value. This is a study which I was reading by Joseph Pine. He was explaining it in 4 steps, right? So at first it was important to extract commodities, okay, so farming, coffee beans, and so on. then making goods, so turning those commodities into some kind of a product. Then in the third stage, it was something like delivering services. Okay, so visiting a coffee shop, going to a place where they can process those goods and give you a finished product. And more and more, it appears that we are right now in the experience economy. Okay, so we're staging experiences. And if I would turn that around and show it clearly, then extracting commodities, beans, the farming. Okay, turning it into product, so you can buy a bag of beans and then you can do whatever you want with them. The third step, providing a service, so going to a coffee shop, getting a coffee, and so on and so on. But right now we're more in the experience economy. Okay, so we have Starbucks, which is a chain where we kind of expect to have a similar or exactly the same level of service. We have a app which is somehow connecting all those experiences together. This is important, that we kind of continue thinking of staging an experience, and this is something which you can imagine as you're all the way from your sales process. So even if you are a B2B SaaS software startup, it's important that you somehow stage a whole experience for someone who is interacting with you for the first time, and you're leading that person to check whether their needs would be answered by your solution, and ultimately whether they would convert into sales. So keep this in mind, and this is one of the points, that we are in the experience economy, and we're staging experiences whenever we're selling, whenever we're serving, whenever we're delivering value from our product. And we're also staging an experience when we're doing the customer support work. We can all imagine companies which are better at solving problems which you have, so they have better customer support, and there are companies which have worse customer support. There are companies which don't have customer support at all, or haven't had for a long time, like Ryan and so on. So keep this in mind, that we're in a experience economy. Coming back to what I said, that there is an underlying principle in service design, customer experience design, user experience design, and also the design of operations on the background. And the underlying logic is that we're using design thinking. Okay, so design thinking is the most popular word in the last few years ever. What I mean by design thinking is that we're making decisions based on data. Okay, and making decisions based on data is pretty much the explanation of what design thinking is. Okay, so in order to make decisions based on data, we have to have first divergent thinking. Okay, so we have to get as much information as we can. So we have multiple options, multiple choices. And once we have all this data, then we can converge and take out what is important. And it can be explained also in this way, in the typical double diamond kind of scheme, which you all know, which you all saw, that we're first exploring the problem, okay? Then we're deciding what we want to fix. Then we test potential solutions based on those things which we decided that are important to fix. And then we refine the final solution, and we kind of go in circles, and we're iterating on this. But this doesn't have to be only associated with creating something new, creating a new product, creating a new service. Okay, what I want to argue here is that it's important that we use this approach whenever we're doing our customer journey map. Okay, I'll explain how the customer journey map is built in a while, but this is the underlying principle that we want to kind of utilize. So once we have a customer journey, or we're building one, we want to collect as much information at each step from our customers or our future customers, so we can actually make an informed decision based on data on how we can improve that particular part of customer journey. So as I said, we have service design on top, which is an umbrella kind of term, and then we have customer experience, user experience, and so on and so on. But what we are using ultimately is we're using this customer-centric design thinking approach to collect that data, to make those decisions, and then to iterate the improvements. Those typical benefits of design thinking could be summed up in a few ways. That your decision making is a little bit different compared to the traditional method, which is based on assumptions, which are not even called assumptions, but it's somebody's ideas. You're trying to apply concepts of co-creation, so you're also taking into account that there are people who can be used in a co-creation method. You do a lot of brainstorming. You try to create multiple solutions towards a problem, and that your outcomes are iterative. So you're not building something which is perfect, which is complete in the first run, but you're making something which you can deploy quickly and then iterate based on that. I would argue that there is also a third thing which can be compared to this, and this is the logic of lean startup. The logic of lean startup, which was written by Eric Ries, it's a blue book, kind of a field manual for people building startups. They argue that it's important to ship an MVP quickly, so something which is super simple, but to ship it quickly and to get some feedback on it. And this is always where I see the kind of tension between design thinking and lean startup, is that design thinking tells you to first go out and collect information and build based on that, whereas lean startup tells you to build quickly, something simple, and then kind of based on the data which you collect, and then you iterate and improve it. Feel free to choose whatever method you prefer, but working with customer journey maps, it's important for us that we first gather the data. And all the case studies which we have done in the last few years were done in this way, where we went out, we interacted with customers, and this was especially when we were improving existing customer journeys. We went out, collected data, co-created different solutions, tested those, and then implemented. So coming to the service design umbrella term, where I wanted to stop by a little bit was at this slide. As an umbrella term, it's also important to look, when you're thinking about your customer journey, not only to think about the customer, so the front stage, which is on the top of how the customer is going through the interactions. It's also important to think about what needs to happen in the background. Okay, and this is especially important for sales, because the customer is going through something, but you have to be doing certain steps, preparing something on the background. And for us, I can illustrate an example by using us as an innovation studio. Okay, so during our sales process, we have 5 steps of our sales process and 5 steps of an experience which the customer is getting. So from a introductory call to a scoping workshop to a case study presentation, then to a solution approach presentation. Those are the things that the person is experiencing, but we all know that on the background, there is an underlying preparation of the documents for those particular presentations. There is some data collection. There is also some research, so background research on the company for which we're presenting, and there's also processing of data which the customer has given to us. So it's always important to keep this in mind, that customer journey mapping is not only customer facing, but it's also organization facing. Okay, and what we want to ultimately achieve by employing these service design methods is that we have some kind of a process improvement, so our customer journey is better. We have a competitive differentiation, so that so we're different to our customers and we're better and we're serving the customer better. And we're also increasing the value, because the better we understand our clients, the better customer value we can achieve in the end, and which is it's better for business. And some of you who have visited the boot camps which I was doing, there was a nice slide which is comparing the design-driven companies to S&P 500 companies. It's called the design-centric metrics. So there was a research done, was 2015 or something, where they made some kind of criteria upon which they classified companies which were design-centric. So those were companies which were using these customer-centric methods, which were using them often, which were using them in product development, in product improvement, and then they compared this basket of companies compared to the S&P 500. And the design index kind of gave us an exponential return compared to the baseline of the S&P 500. So if you are into investing, maybe it's worth looking up this study. There you can probably find also the information of how this basket was created, what were the factors that they were looking at, and how were they categorizing these companies. So a small investment tip in the morning. So we have the introduction. We've gone through the introduction. I just wanted to clarify all these terms, also what service design stands for, and also why is it important to look at it from the customer-centric point of view when you're creating the customer journey. Some of you probably have worked with a customer journey map. Some of you haven't, but I will explain it very easily. So customer journey wants to map all the interactions which happen from the first point when the customer thinks of you, when the customer sees an awareness campaign, when the customer sees the banner, or when the customers reach out by your sales personnel and they have the first interaction. And we are mapping what they go through and what is happening all the way from that first point all the way to them either doing a sale or doing an upsell or cross-sell or them leaving, because you want to map the whole thing. Okay, so you don't really want to stop with the customer journey at the point when the person purchases, because most of the companies which we interact with these days are actually SaaS companies. Okay, so you are not doing a one-off sale of a product, but you're creating a long-term lasting relationship, which you want to also kind of boost midway. You know, you want to sell them a little bit more. You want to understand the customer a little bit better to see whether you can serve them with something else. Okay, so it's important that the customer journey doesn't stop at point when when the customer opens the wallet and that's it. Okay, it can look something like this. It can be split into different phases. We like to split them into phases. I can then also share with you our template which we're using at Cube, the one which we developed, which is very similar. And you kind of want to split the phases into, we can say a get to know each other kind of phase, so an awareness phase. Then we want to split into the purchase phase, post-purchase phase. Maybe we're also customer journey can also go into multiple directions. So there is not only one stream of interaction, but there can be multiple streams of interaction. There can be multiple customer journeys. Let's say if you are a physical business, okay, so you have a customer journey which is physical. So when a person walks into a store or walks into your service provider place, and then it can be a little bit different online. Okay, so when we work with bigger companies, let's say when we work with banks or utility companies, we try to always construct two customer journeys, one that is purely digital and the other one that is purely physical. And this is mostly due to the fact that different types of customers interact with the company physically, and different types of customers interact with the customers digitally. And this is especially true for companies such as utility companies, because the average customer for them is about 55 years old, but this is the average customer. And when we're working with these methods, we never try to look at the average customer, because we know that there is a big bunch of people who are young digital natives who will only interact with the company through the phone or online. And then there is even bigger chunk of people which will interact with the company purely physically. And this is the reason why we need to have these two separate customer journeys. For your case, it could be so that if your solution is focused on multiple types of B2B companies, you want to have multiple types of customer journeys. So let's say, for instance, we will be working with an accounting company. An accountant, we know that right now, there are small companies, digital companies, which are looking for digital accounting. So that would create us one customer journey. And we also know that there are these ad hoc opportunists which need to tax their crypto earnings. So that could construct another customer journey which is focused purely on these people. And this goes also hand in hand with the concept of having multiple landing pages for your product propositions. Okay, so you always, before you start mapping this customer journey, try to figure out how many you actually have. Are there multiple? Is there just one? Are we at the beginning and we're not selling, so we only have one customer journey? Or is our business already, divided into multiple streams. So it's important for us that we actually map multiple customer journeys. So keep this in mind. Secondly, what we usually do when we map customer journeys is that we try to speak to customers and to people in all of these phases and ask them to reflect on how it happened. Okay, so when we were working, I was already using this example of utility companies. We were building a customer journey for their gas boiler sales business. Okay, so we did about 40 or 50 interviews with people, and we asked them to reflect on the whole kind of experience which they had, all the way from the time when they realized that they need to replace their gas boiler, all the way to a successful installation and kind of set up. And we were marking, so what kind of tasks and activities the customer needed to do in those particular points. That was one thing. So that's the first column, the first line. And in the second line, we were mapping what are the pain points. So what didn't go that well? What were the times when the customer felt lost, when the customer felt unsure? What were the times when the customer wasn't approached by anyone, so the customer wasn't really sure, is it going on, is it not going on, and so on. And usually we managed to collect quite a lot of pain points for each of those particular steps. And this is important because we were approaching it with the divergent kind of approach. So when we were looking at the design thinking double diamond, we were in the first phase. We're taking all that data in, all those pain points, all those ideas, and all those experiences. So we actually managed to have quite a thick line in the pain points part. And this was data collection. Then after you collected all the data, you try to look for opportunities. Okay, so then we took our convergent approach, and we started evaluating whether a certain pain point has appeared multiple times with these people. Have we seen it? Have we seen any pattern in this data? Has it been only said by a certain group of people, geographically, age-wise, and so on and so on? Has it been different in areas where people have a physical customer service center, or where they haven't, where they don't have a physical customer services center? Okay, so once you collected the data, you're doing quite a lot of analytical work, and you're trying to look for patterns in this data, because these patterns will give you some hints on how to do your customer segmentation, and this is important. Okay, and then lastly, what you want to map out is the touch point. Okay, so touch point is whenever interaction happens with the customer, if we're reaching out to them, or if the customer is reaching out to us. So it's important that we map these touch points. So for example, installing a gas boiler has multiple touch points. Okay, one of the touch points is when the expert or the technician gets in touch with you. Secondly, there is a visit, and thirdly, there is also a check by how we call it, someone who is certified to check the installation. Okay, so multiple touch points, so multiple opportunities for failure, but also multiple opportunities to stage a nice experience. What I said just now is pretty much applicable to those companies which are already selling. Okay, so you can do a reflection, you can collect all the data, and you can see where you're doing well and where you're not doing that well, and what are the opportunities for improvement. For those who don't really have a customer journey or are not selling yet, this is a bit more tricky, okay, because you will have to work with a lot of hypotheses. And here I would take the approach of trying to ship something which you can sell quickly, so you can gain some initial experience with it. But also I would list what are our hypotheses when we're building this fresh customer journey. Okay, so how do we think that the customer should interact, and then we should go out and test it with sales. What I was also mentioning that is important is to say who your customers are, because working with this example of the utility company, if we say that the average customer is 55 years old, then should we approach this customer journey from this point of view, that there is an average customer, and should we create the customer journey for average customer? no, this is wrong. And when we ask the second thing, which is usually very funny, is when we ask some of the startups, who are your customers, the typical answer is this, which always makes us smile, because this is just not true. There are multiple segments of different customers, and if you're doing something new, then maybe this is something which is a little bit more relevant. Okay, so you have some innovators at the beginning, some early adopters. Let's imagine how many people are using smartphones. Okay, so now even the laggards are using smartphones. But when we look at Web 3.0, so things like NFTs and crypto, well, we're somewhere in the first 2.5%, maybe slowly moving into the early adopters, right? So we have to identify, also looking at the product adaptation curve, who could be those people which are important for us. But looking at, this is for launching something new, but looking at something which is already working and already in place. There are differences between customers who are younger, who are older, who are living in cities, who are living outside of cities, who have higher income, who have lower income, and so on. Okay, so you really have to look for those particular type of segments which are different. And working with the example of us as Cube, as an innovation studio, we also have multiple segments which we focus on. Okay, so we have certain types of innovation departments in big corporates. That's one segment. Then we have medium-sized companies where we target, again, a different type of people. And then we have municipalities, which also have totally different needs. And that kind of gives us at least 3 or 4 segments which we look at. And each of them have a little bit different needs and expectations. So therefore, you have the opportunity to stage your experiences in a little bit different way. What is also important when you're doing research on your customer journey is that usually the best insights come from those extreme personas. So if I use this example of gas boilers, for me, it would be interesting to speak to someone who is buying a gas boiler for the first time, but also someone who has replaced their gas boiler multiple times, because they have had many experiences. They can compare and they can give you interesting insights. Okay, so this is something to keep in mind. So those extreme personas. So either someone who has not been exposed to that thing, or someone who has been exposed more than the average. And those are usually the interesting those interesting insights. So let's say that we were doing an improvement for airline boarding system. Okay, it would be cool to speak to someone who's been flying, once or twice, because those are people who have beginner's eyes and they notice everything. They notice way more than the majority, but also frequent flyers, because they've flown with multiple airlines, they've seen multiple approaches, and they are also more sensitive to those little changes. And once you have the solution, that's where you want to validate with, the majority. Okay, so looking a little bit at the customer segmentation, you want to divide them into multiple groups, and we all know that. And there are multiple ways of how to do it. We have the geographic profile, demographic, psychological, behavioral formulas. If you're looking at companies, it makes sense to look at things on how digitalized they are, whether they are being run. So if their HQ is in your country, or they are somehow part of a bigger group, so regional group. We also look at size. We also look at things such as if the person that I want to speak to, if there are such positions in that company. Okay, so for example, I would like to speak, if I'm Cube and Innovation Studio, I would like to speak with head of innovations, head of strategic innovations, head of transformation. And I'm looking whether there are such profiles in that company. And if there are, that's one segment. And if there aren't, then I know that this company has not yet made the steps to establish such department or such organization. Therefore, I know that I have to approach them a little bit differently and also tell them different things. Okay, so it's important to, whenever you're either analyzing your existing customer journey map or you're creating a new one, it's important to keep in mind that there are different customer segments, and the more time you spend on analyzing those, so you actually have at least few, the better. So coming back to the customer journey map, as I said, it's important to kind of first look at the goal of what the person is trying to achieve. Okay, are they trying? No, what is the problem that they try to solve when they interact with you? This is something that it's always important to keep in mind, and then we can kind of split it into phases. Okay, and we can split those phases. We can usually identify touch points at the beginning, and then based on the data that we collect, we are able to see if we're doing well in that particular part or we're not doing that well. So looking at the boiler sales, we knew that we were very strong in the setup phase. So after the sale has been made, we knew that once things start going and the technician visits the house and they start doing everything that they need to do, people were satisfied because it was installed quickly, it was working right away, and so on. So that was nice. But we know that we were struggling at the beginning, at the point after a salesman has visited the house and has made a first look around. And then there was a request to prepare a price offer, and we know that this is where the experience was worst. That's where we had most complaints. So we kind of drew an emotional map of the whole customer journey. So we know that at the beginning, when they started speaking, it was spirits were high, and then when they got into the kind of business dealings, so preparing the price offer and confirming it and so on, it went a little bit down, and then it went up again once the installation and setup has been happening. And this is important to keep in mind, because based on that you can identify those opportunities, and you can also somehow edit and adjust the backstage. So you can adjust the processes, you can rearrange resources, and it can be summed up in this way. Okay, so first we split it into phases. We write down what the touch points are. So whenever are we interacting with the customer is interacting with us. What kind of pains have we identified and have we collected, so we can kind of draw this emotional curve. And then looking at opportunities, we're looking at how can we edit the backstage, what can we reshuffle so that it actually works a little bit better. One of the good case studies which we use quite often is something that we have done with a local outpatient clinic. So we were analyzing the customer journey there, and we were speaking to a lot of customers. Of course, this is not a tech project, so I will not spend too much time. But this was the area where it was good to see those totally different people who are visiting it. So you have multiple. You could segment it pretty easily because you have multiple people, and it was also quite easy to find those extreme personas to speak to, because those senior people, they spend there quite a lot of time, and they have been visiting it for tens of years. And then you have people who have recently migrated into the city, so those are the first timers. So you get quite a lot of interesting observations. You get quite a lot of interesting discussions with these people. Okay? We try to call it that whenever we're collecting this information, we first want to observe a little bit, then we want to experience it ourselves. We want to do some interviews, and then we also want to get some outside inspiration. When we were doing this research with the outpatient clinic, but also when we were doing research on selling of those gas boilers, we actually did the experience ourselves. Okay, so we identified a few houses, some friends which had a gas boiler, and we requested our client, but we also requested competition of our clients to come and check the gas boiler and see how they produce an offer, and how the whole experience is. So we experienced it ourselves first, so we could ask better questions once we did those interviews. And of course, then at the end, we were also trying to inspire ourselves abroad with I wouldn't even call it competition, but inspiration. So kind of getting in the field ourselves. The last thing that I want to cover is, why is customer journey important, and what are some of the benefits that it can give you? Well, the first thing is that you will have metrics to track, and you will have certain points and certain stages where you can start calculating conversions, where you can start calculating where you're losing customers, where you're gaining customers, where you're creating upsell opportunities, and so on. Because we all know that you need to track, or you need to have business metrics in order to be aware of how the whole process is functioning. In the last webinar which we did, we were discussing the growth hacking and the funnel. This is one of the examples which can be implemented. This is the acquisition kind of funnel. But the more important thing here, this is something which you can read on your own, or you can watch the video in replay on NGI. But what is important is that between each stage there is some kind of a conversion. So we're tracking some numbers, and this is also something that we want to do in the customer journey map. Okay, so we want to have some data on our customer support performance. We want to have some data on our of how happy people are when we're installing their gas boiler, if we make any mistakes or if we don't make any mistakes. Okay, so it's important that we select for each of those stages, that we select some data. And based on studies, there are some benefits which having a customer journey produces. The first thing is that based on the Aberdeen Group research, we found out that there is when you have a good customer journey, your investment into marketing is more efficient. And this is especially important for startups, because we know that the money is low, and we have to be very effective when we're investing money into marketing. So that's why it definitely makes sense. The good thing about customer journey map is that this is something that you can produce on your own, or your internal team can produce on your own, so you don't really have to buy it from anyone. But when you're buying marketing services or you're investing into digital marketing, you can save some money. Other outcomes are that good customer journey also makes your customer service more effective, because you know what types of problems people encounter, so you can prepare your stuff better, and you can prepare your processes on the background better, that they can serve or solve the problem of those customers in a faster way. Engagement of employees, actually quite a big topic, which we recently discussed with some of the clients, that they're looking at employee journey. So not only customer journey, but also the employee journey. So looking at what is it that new employees go through when they interact with their employer. Sales cycles are increased in speed. This is also important, fairly important for all companies, because if I have good segmentation and I know what to tell those prospective clients, then of course I can be better at closing those deals. And faster sales cycles means that we're selling more. And then finally, upsell and cross-sell activities, especially for those of you who are in the software as a service business. This is very important, because you want to continue increasing that customer value or customer lifetime value. So this is important. Three more things: satisfied customers. Okay, recommendations, obviously. So if you figure out a way how to stimulate customers who have already purchased, and how you can stimulate them to write a recommendation, this is totally worth it. Mentions on social media channel. Okay, this is going to be specific to certain industries, and this is important, and this is something where you as a startup can gain a little bit of a competitive advantage. Most of the companies are not analyzing their customer journeys, which is interesting that they're not doing it, but it's becoming. We were actually looking at trends of search for customer experience, customer journeys, and it's slowly increasing. It's not yet at a stage as design thinking is, because design thinking just exploded in recent years, but customer experience and customer journeys, this is something which is slowly coming. Okay, so summing it up, these are all the things which you can do to improve your business, right? So you can do better marketing, yeah. You can do better sales, so changing the way that you sell. You can increase productivity, so decrease the number of inefficiencies which you have in your business and save money. Or you can work with staging better experiences. So keeping in mind this logic of staging better experiences, this is something that is totally key for the whole customer journey kind of business that you want to do. This is also a way how a customer journey can look like. Okay, so you can split it into phases. We have awareness, research, comparison, purchase, use, and care. Then there are multiple kind of entry points where the person starts. It can be at events, it can be from our marketing activities, and it can be also from our PR activities. But what is important, and this is something which I want to stress, is that when if you are selling already and you don't have a customer journey map, then this is an ideal scenario where you can get someone to experience your whole customer journey. You can do research with people who have already gone through your customer journey. Based on that, you can sketch it up, split it into different parts. You can capture all the pain points, and you can also capture all the possible improvements which you can do. Remember that all these possible improvements are hypotheses. Okay, so you want to figure out a way how you can try them, how you can test them, and how you can then later apply them for all customers. If you don't have a customer journey map yet, then you have to build an ideal one based on a hypothesis, and then try to push yourself as a company to start shipping a product, start selling a product, so you will actually get some people to go through the whole funnel, and that will end up with you having people that you can talk to and kind of reflect on it and collect those interesting insights. I have a few case stories. One of them I already mentioned. So this was the outpatient clinic research. This is the this is the research for the gas boilers. It's in Slovak. I'm sorry, maybe some of you will understand. So this is something which we did for Inoji. And there we actually implemented quite a lot of interesting things, such as stronger telephone sales. So people in call center. We also introduced a totally new configurator, which made it pretty easy to configure, when should be the right time to replace your gas boiler. And all in all, from these 50 interviews which we did, we actually, I think we identified about 200 improvements or so. And then we distilled that down to about 15 to 20 key ones, which we were then over a year, which we were slowly introducing, testing and implementing. And what is important that whenever you make changes, you first have to measure the as is state, and then you have to measure what changed after you have improved it. It is very important, and we try to keep an eye on that so we can actually track whether the customer satisfaction scores are going up. And this can be anything from net promoter score, although we don't like to use net promoter score that much, but net promoter score is fine to start with. But you can also measure things such as ease of interactions, time spent, and so on. Now you might be wondering, okay, what should I do next right now? Well, I totally suggest that you download the template for a customer journey map. Just Google customer journey map template, choose which one you like most. There are multiple ones. Map your journey. If you have an existing journey, great. Experience it and map it. If you don't have one, build one based on assumptions and hypotheses, and also build a list of how you could test those hypotheses, and then push really hard to start shipping a product or to start selling a product. So you have people which are going through the funnel. In case you have a customer journey, then try to get those people who went through the funnel to give you some data, and you can start filling in the canvases. Identify points to improve naturally, and then implement and iterate. What is important to keep in mind is that keep it customer centric. Divergent, convergent thinking. Okay, divergent, collect as much data as you can, then make decisions on what is important to improve. Do it quickly, do it often, do it iteratively, and but still keep in mind that the most important thing is that you don't get stuck with it, but you sell. Okay, so generating revenue, selling is the number one priority in every company, but this is something that can be a nice tool that will aid you and help you a little bit on this journey. Finally, some tips for inspiration. Okay, so if you don't only enjoy listening to me, but you also want to get some external validation and maybe read something which will guide you, fine. Good Services, it's a book. I also have it here. it's a book by a person who has been working for a long time in UK governmental service design division. So you can get a good idea of a nice principle how to design your service in a better way. So totally recommended, and it's actually a very nice book. It's printed on this nice paper. There's some nice case studies, so totally recommend this one. Second, my friend Mark Fontaine, guy from Netherlands, he runs something which is called Service Design Show. Something I totally recommend because he invites people. Some of the discussions can be a little bit philosophical. So if you're not a designer and you don't aspire to be a designer, it can be sometimes a little bit tricky to listen to. But they have had a few episodes which was covering customer journey maps. So if this is something that you want to do right away, then Mark Fontaine's podcast is definitely a must listen to. They're not too long, so that's pretty good. And then finally, if you have some questions, write them into the chat. And if you don't have any questions, then feel free to reach out to me, as I said, on my LinkedIn. Just remind me that you had this workshop, and feel free to shoot those questions at me. I can also, I'll speak with Ivan after this workshop, but I can also provide you with a template which we are using. I just have to check if it's in English or if it's in Slovak. But being you, I wouldn't worry that much about the particular template. You can find a lot of them online. There are many available, and anyway, you will probably have to edit the template yourself because you might find out that you have multiple streams of customer journeys. So actually, what I suggest that is the easiest is that you would use something like Miroboard or Mural. So those digital kind of board where you can use sticky notes. We use them in some of the boot camps. I would use those and then map it. Just look at a template of how it needs to be built and then kind of do that into a Miro board. And I believe that Miro board actually has as well some templates for customer journey maps which you can use. So I would start with that, do a bit of research, and see how your emotional curve is with the customer, if they're satisfied or not. So good luck to all of you. Happy to continue the conversations in LinkedIn, and yeah, have a nice day.
So thank you, Slava, very much for your presentation, for your examples and case studies, and also some tips at the end. Still, there is a possibility to drop your questions, and if in meanwhile, I would have one question for you, Slava, if I may. So you mentioned that about 50% of companies they don't use customer journey mapping. I assume that if we are considering just startups, probably this percentage would be higher. So I would like to ask you, if I'm a startup and I'm considering starting with customer journey mapping, what should be the main problems that I may face at the beginning, or which dead-end street I should avoid?
So of course, companies which are not selling yet, it's difficult to construct customer journeys, right? Because you haven't had anyone who has gone through the funnel, to whom I sold, whom I delivered the product to, with whom I had any customer support interactions. So this is probably the first thing, okay? But all the startup theory tells us that we have to focus on shipping our product quickly, so we actually have some people who have gone through the funnel. So I wouldn't spend that much time on it if you haven't really sold anything and if you are in the product development phase. So this is the first. So the thing is that you don't want to get stuck in this process of creating a customer journey if you're not selling it. Okay, so it's better that you actually start selling something and then you build your customer journey and you iterate on that.
Thank you. So if there is no more questions, so I would like you, Slava, once more, and all the participants, don't hesitate to reach out for Slava at his LinkedIn page or us in Tetra at business.ngi.eu, where we can provide you a lot of information, resources, and again, a couple of webinars are still on the track, and also our public funding masterclass is waiting for you. So if you are interested, we will be very happy if you join us also in our further activities. So thank you very much once more, and have a brilliant day. Bye.
Bye.